So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Hello to everyone, and welcome to the latest Future Made Clear live Q&A session today. Um, I'm Adeline Farrelly, and I'm Secretary General of FEVI, and FEVI is the European Trade Association for the Container Glass Industry. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us on this session. You are joining a series of Q&As that we're organizing to discuss interesting topics that are of interest to the value chain and the brands and customers that are working with glass. And so today, the Future Made Clear episode is on a very interesting topic. We're going to try to answer the question, should health be part of the sustainable packaging indicators? So in general, packaging is considered safe for use for food and beverages, as long as it's made of high quality materials and it's, of course, properly used and stored. However, as with any packaging material, there is always some risk of chemical leaching, and it's important to be aware of the potential hazards and take appropriate precautions. And so, to help us tackle this question today, we have two outstanding experts in this field to discuss the issue with us. So, without further ado, let me introduce them. Miquel Porta. Miquel is a physician and professor, expert in biomonitoring human health effects of environmental contaminants, and he has published several hundred scientific articles and holds academic appointments in Barcelona, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and New York. And he is the current editor of a dictionary of epidemiology, published by the Oxford University Press. So thank you for being with us today, Miquel.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And we have also Jane Monk, Managing Director and Chief Scientific Officer at Food Packaging Forum Foundation, which is a research and science communication organization focusing on chemicals in all types of food contact materials. Jane holds a PhD in environmental toxicology and is a scientific member of several societies, including the American Chemical Society, the Society of Toxicology, and many others, I have to say. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you.
So, to the audience joining us today, please leave your questions in the comments box and we'll try to get to them at the end of today's talk. So, let's get started. In recent years, and the first question is to you, Miquel, in recent years, there's been an increasing focus on health and wellness issues among consumers. As an epidemiology professor and medical consultant and researcher, how have you observed the evolution of these health concerns? And if I may ask you to specifically address the increasing concern about food contaminants. And so, what do we know from the science about the impact of exposure to these chemicals on consumer health?
Well, thank you, Adeline. Indeed, many studies have shown that we are daily exposed to mixtures of toxic pollutants, of chemicals throughout our life course, both at high and low concentrations, generally at low concentrations. And this daily exposure during the life course is due, when it comes to non-persistent pollutants, to daily exposure. We can excrete them through urine, for instance, but we are daily exposed and we measure them in the vast majority of the population on a daily basis. Concerning the persistent pollutants, the pollutants that our bodies do not excrete, this persistence, this physical chemical persistence in our bodies is the reason that they accumulate. So, where do these chemicals come from? How do they enter our bodies? Essentially, through the food we eat and its packaging, the water we drink, the air we breathe, and in fact, also via many other consumer goods. So the exposure is quite frequent. And the effects are also quite wide because we know, because of a great deal of scientific studies, that many of these pollutants alter, they change a wide range of our body functions, of our physiological functions, including, for instance, the normal functioning of the immunological system or of our hormones, of the endocrine systems. And these and others physiological changes cause a number of clinically relevant disorders and diseases, including, for instance, infertility or congenital malformations, diabetes and other metabolic disorders. Very likely, in many instances, they contribute to cause obesity and some cancers, as well as some inflammatory diseases or neurodegenerative diseases as Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. They are all multifactorial diseases. They have a number of causes, but these chemicals present in food and food packaging contribute to these diseases.
Wow, that's quite it's quite alarming. I mean, as we have Jane with us today, the Chief Scientific Officer at the Packaging Forum Foundation. Jane, how are these heightened health concerns related to food packaging? Can you say something about this?
Yeah, thank you, Adeline. I think it's essential for people to be aware that chemicals are present in food packaging. And depending on the materials, some of those chemicals can actually migrate into food and drink. So migration is the technical term we use for transfer of chemicals from packaging into food. And the types of chemicals that can migrate into food from packaging are highly diverse. And it really depends on the specific type of the packaging material. Another factor that I want to point out here and that people should consider is that some of the materials used to make food packaging can indeed, as Mika said, contain known hazardous chemicals. And these chemicals can transfer, again, migrate from the packaging into the food, and they can increase the risk for consumers because people ingest these chemicals when they consume their food and drink. So, for example, endocrine disrupting chemicals are a type of hazardous chemical that can interfere with our endocrine system, our hormone system, as Michael already mentioned. And these types of chemicals can affect our health and well-being in many different areas. Maybe you've heard of endocrine disrupting chemicals that are used to make some types of food packaging, like bisphenol A, for example. And they indeed have been found to migrate into foodstuffs. So bisphenol A, but there's a whole range of other chemicals. And actually, and this is probably even more alarming, the same is true for carcinogens. There are known carcinogens that are used to make food packaging, and these carcinogens can also transfer from certain types of packaging into foodstuff. So so packaging can become a source of hazardous chemicals that actually can be avoided. I think that's the good news here. And then not to forget about microplastics. Sorry, just to add that. Microplastics are tiny bits of plastic, so it's solid, but they're very, very small. And these microplastics can be generated when plastic packaging is normally used as intended. So when you tear open packaging, or when you unscrew a bottle, for example. And there is concern now that microplastics can have an impact on the immune system of humans and potentially lead to adverse health effects. But I also have to say that more research on the actual health impacts is still being carried out. So it's too early to have a final verdict on that.
Michael, I think you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, really, because I fully agree with what Jane said. On one hand, there is plenty of scientific evidence to act, to be more proactive. On the other hand, it is true that when it comes to immunological disorders and infectious diseases, we do need more research. I am surprised that little has been published on chemical contaminants and COVID-19, for instance. We recently published a paper in the journal Environmental Research in which we show that certain contaminants can increase the risk of the disease, which is not surprising. One, because we know that many of these chemical contaminants are immunomodulatory or immunodepressant, as Jane was saying, and also because there is wide variability, wide differences in how humans have responded to the infection. Some people got COVID, other people did not. And part of these differences in the susceptibility to COVID, it would make a lot of sense if empirical studies were to confirm that chemical contaminants play a role in such susceptibility.
But Michaela, if food packaging is a source of contaminants for food and drink, what do you think is the solution? How can we help consumers to choose a packaging that is both environmentally friendly and safe for them?
Well, many organizations, including the food companies, can help consumers make better choices. But I also have to say that I was a bit surprised when we did a study on the presence of plasticizers in the urine of some 20 volunteers in Spain. And one of them was myself. And when I saw, the plastic residues in my urine, I thought, well, but wow, I've been watching. I am aware of these problems. I've been careful for many years, and these contaminants are still in my body. So we need companies, we need consumers, and we need also regulation and public policies that protect us better.
Yeah. Maybe Jane, you can react to that. Mikhail just mentioned that these contaminants can be measured. So we do have the ability to measure them. So should health impacts then be an indicator of sustainable packaging? And I'd like you to just tell us a little bit about the understanding the packaging scorecard. How does that fit in with helping us to measure this and include health as an indicator in sustainable packaging?
Yeah, thanks, Adeline. So up until now, sustainable packaging measures have indeed focused primarily on carbon emissions as a proxy for all environmental impacts, because CO2 emissions can be quantified quite easily. However, as you alluded to already, food packaging clearly has other impacts, environmental impacts, but also human health impacts. And so in terms of environmental impacts, people are increasingly aware of plastic pollution. And in terms of the health impacts, of course, the chemicals, because chemicals do migrate from packaging into food, and they too are measurable. And by the way, they also can have impacts on the environment. And in this area, whereas of chemicals, I think there is opportunity, and there's also an urgent need to make significant improvements. I do think that the health impacts should be measured, and human health impacts are in a way part of the sustainable, of the understandable packaging scorecard, because human health is central to sustainability, and it doesn't make sense to separate sustainable packaging from human health, right? These two issues belong together. And I think it's really great that we have the scorecard now, because you can measure these impacts, and what you can measure, you can manage. So yeah, maybe I can say briefly what the Understanding Packaging Scorecard is for those people who don't know.
Please, yes.
It's a method, it's a tool for quantifying environmental and health impacts of food packaging. It's freely available online. and you can use it to assess impacts for the most common types of foodware and food packaging materials that are used in the food service industry right now. And we'll put a link in the chat, in the comments. My colleague Joel offered to do that.
Yes,
so you
we'll
can
make
go
sure
check
that
it
goes
out.
in. Yeah, yeah.
I just also want to add that the scorecard is being developed by collaboration. It's not just Food Packaging Forum that's been working on it, but we've got industry partners, we have NGO partners, we have academics who are part of our consortium. So it's a very diverse group of stakeholders that owns the tool and that is developing it. And what's really great about the Understanding Packaging Scorecard is that it provides a more comprehensive approach to sustainable packaging that considers various aspects of a product throughout its entire life cycle. And importantly, it makes factual comparisons of different packaging materials possible, because you're not comparing apples to oranges, but you're comparing apples to apples, so to say.
But maybe, can you just give us an idea of what kind of parameters is the scorecard assessing? And maybe which packaging materials best meet the health protection indicators?
So the scorecard evaluates packaging materials based on 6 parameters. 3 of these parameters are quantitative, and they're based on the method of life cycle analysis, LCA. And so these 3 parameters are carbon emission, plastic pollution, and freshwater use. Very, very important freshwater use. And then we've got 3 qualitative parameters, namely recoverability, so end of life. Then the sustainable sourcing, so where do the raw materials come from, the feedstock that's used to make the packaging. And then last but not least, the chemicals of concern. So what are the chemicals that are used to make the material, and also how inert is the material, as a measure for assessing how much chemicals have the propensity to transfer from the packaging into the foodstuff. So kind of a measure of migration. And the other question you asked about the materials that score best, I do have to say that in terms of which packaging material performs best in the scorecard in terms of chemicals of concern, there's still significant knowledge gaps, mostly because it's very difficult to get information from suppliers about which chemicals are actually present in certain packaging materials. Some materials are actually surprisingly complex in their chemical composition. And they need a lot of chemicals to make them, but also because of their material properties when they are made and so on, you can also have quite a bit of impurities in them. And oftentimes the producers of the materials don't share this information with their customers, unfortunately. But to help overcome these data gaps, we've actually compiled a list of about 650 chemicals that we consider as of greatest concern to human health. I always have to say based on the available knowledge, because a lot of chemicals haven't been tested for health impact, but based on the available knowledge. And that's because of their inherent chemical properties. So these chemicals, they just, independent of what dose, they just have hazard properties, which we think are of concern. And that's why these chemicals should be avoided in food packaging. And again, I'm going to ask my colleague Joel to pop a link to this list in the chat. It's freely available.
Okay, thank you, Jane, for that. So there's a lot of knowledge gaps still. It's not easy to determine at this stage, okay, what material is better than the other. But then maybe just looking to the future then, how does the future look like? As consumers' health concerns continue to evolve, how do you see this issue redefining the concept of sustainable packaging in the future?
Can I answer?
Mikhail, maybe I can ask you that. Yeah.
Okay. No, I think the process is dynamic. Things keep evolving. Sometimes safer materials are found, safer from all points of view. I fully agree that it would make no sense to separate human health from the health of the planet. And we are all trying to promote integrative approaches as the One Health concept, which includes animal health as well, as you know, or now the planetary well-being. We are part of the planet. Human health is part of the issues. And sometimes safer alternatives are found. So we need to keep searching, and the industry keeps searching. But at the same time, for now, consumers, we have to seek the more inert containers, containers that do not, whose substances do not migrate into our food and then into our bodies, right? And these may go from, the glass containers to the pans we use when we cook, to the footwear, and so on. As consumers, we have a number of available alternatives when the economic capacity of the household is reasonable, because for other people, inequalities in access to safe materials do exist. So from a scientific perspective, we will see more results, more research and more results, hopefully safer materials. And from a regulatory standpoint, I also think that there are initiatives in Europe that try to protect us and that are going into the right direction. Probably more slowly than we would like, but some of them, for instance, when it comes to the PFAS, to the perfluorinated substances, there are recent initiatives. And the Food Packaging Foundation provides every month a number of informations on initiatives at the European Parliament in Brussels, as you know. We have to, as a citizen, we have to support these initiatives, I think.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I vouch for that excellent newsletter from the Food Packaging Forum that drops into our inboxes every so often, and so that helps me. Actually, maybe Jane, could you come in on that this question as well? How do you see this issue of health redefining the concept of sustainable packaging in the future?
Well, first of all, thanks for that nice feedback. I pass that on to the team because we're a big team here working hard. But also picking up on what Mikael said, I do completely agree. I think we should focus on using inert materials. Also, keeping in mind that materials that are inert also are better for circularity, right? We can reuse them. They're better to recycle because they don't get contaminated with chemicals, which is a really big issue. And I also believe that this issue of sustainable and healthy, safer food packaging can actually be an opportunity for brands who want to differentiate their products by focusing on packaging that doesn't contain any hazardous chemicals. And I think the time is right for this now, actually, because consumer awareness about health and environmental impacts of food packaging continues to grow. It's kind of exploding right now, also due to the plastic pollution crisis, of course, that put the issue really front and center for many people. So right now, there's a clear opportunity for brands to differentiate themselves and appeal to those health-conscious consumers like Mikael and myself, and maybe also you, Adeline. So I think that brands that embrace this knowledge and that prioritize inert and environmentally friendly packaging can actually stand out from the competition. And the increasing interest in toxic-free packaging really it gives me hope. I think there's more and more brands that are investing in this because of its added value, and also in terms of helping with the brand's reputation. And we've at the Food Packaging Forum, we've put together a database where we actually map these initiatives by brands. that are leading the way already, that are removing PFAS, for example, BPA, and so on. And we've put that together on our website. It's called the Brand Retail Initiatives Database, and I'll ask my colleague Joel to please put a link in the chat again. Just keep in mind that we include here only public commitments and initiatives. So if you are a brand owner or retailer, and you do have an initiative on chemicals in packaging, then please let us know, and please share it publicly. The tool is really cool because you can look for different topics. So you can look for chemicals. We've also included commitments on recycling or on reusable packaging, and you can search by brand name, and you can also search by geographical location. And then finally, I think to summarize, health has never been more important to consumers than it is now. It's a real mega trend, and people are looking for brands with integrity that put purpose before profit, and that take responsibility for their actions. And consumers are demanding that brands offer packaging that is truly sustainable, both from an environmental and from a health perspective, and packaging that is, safe, really, really safe, free from hazardous chemicals.
Yeah, Jane, absolutely. This is actually, okay, it's a concern, but it's also an opportunity for brands and retailers that are forward-looking, and as you say, that there's quite this hope in the pipeline, because some of these issues are actually controllable. So I'm just looking to see if we have any questions, and so we'll take a couple of questions. There is a question that we're not quite sure
I can say something
what it
about
means.
that.
It's about yeah, it's more about looking inwards rather than trying to control the external, isn't it? Okay, Mikkel, you go ahead.
Philosophical question.
I would say that it's both. It's both, right? You wanna pay attention to yourself, as many people are doing in these difficult times. You want to listen to yourself. How do you feel? And it is also about controlling pollution, not just threats, but actual harmful agents, harmful chemicals. We want to control the entrance, the ingestion of harmful chemicals through food packaging or water pollution or air pollution. We have to work on all the dimensions of the problem, right? And we want to do it in a way that is not threatening, that is not anxious, because at the same time we recognize the many good things that we enjoy, including good food and much better water than in many other times in humanity's history. We do recognize that much progress has been done, but this does not give us the right to forget, the damage that some pollutants are doing, the damage in all respects, including human diseases. We have to continue with this balance of appreciating what goes well and working towards reducing what does damage.
Yeah, and maybe if I may add to that, Adlan, I think we actually also have a moral obligation. I mean, Mikkel and I, and now you also have this knowledge, and we need to enable people who have the power to change things, to enable them that they can act in the right way. And I'm absolutely certain that we do need to put all our efforts together to remove hazardous chemicals that can affect our health long term and generations to come. It's an absolute moral obligation. It's not okay to use chemicals that make people infertile, for example.
Yeah, no, I mean it is very shocking when you hear some of the things that have been set out, and the fact that there's things we know, and there's lots more things that we don't know yet, and so we need to keep working on that. There's a lot of gaps in our knowledge.
It is only natural, Adeline, that at first when you hear, a few of the diseases that I mentioned, that some people may be a bit shocked. We could include, for instance, childhood obesity. Many of these pollutants are obesogens. We just need to take our time to digest the information available and then to find ways to act.
Yeah. Just looking at some other questions. So there's one on what would you suggest to do to a glass packaging manufacturer?
Thank you for that question, Nicholas. I think it resonates with the previous question because we can only change ourselves, right? And glass is an inert material, but I think there are still opportunities to improve glass quite a bit. For example, of course, one of the biggest concerns in terms of sustainability for glass packaging are the CO2 emissions. So I do think that there needs to be quite a bit of work being done to reduce the fossil carbon use in the glass industry. And then I think one of the issues, maybe to zoom in on something particular, sometimes there's print directly on glass packaging. And because glass is recycled a lot, which is great, but if you use chemicals that are hazardous in the print on the glass packaging, they can kind of end up in the glass when you recycle it. So we should really work together with other participants in the supply chain who make the printing inks, for example, to make sure that there aren't any hazardous chemicals that are used in those printing inks, just as an example.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jane, for that. And speaking on behalf of the glass industry, if I may, I mean, yes, glass is an inert material. It's a permanent material, 100% recyclable. But we also have some issues that we need to make sure that we don't contaminate the recycling value chain by using anything that might disturb that potential of glass being 100% recyclable. Okay, I think we should really finish up because we've come to the end of the half hour. We're just a little bit over time, and maybe I would like to summarize. It's not possible to summarize, but I'll try to take some takeaways. So my takeaway is that we can expect more research on chemical contaminants migrating from packaging, and that can impact health. And that we are now starting to measure it. And Jane, I think you said what we don't measure, we can't manage, right? So human health impact should be measured as part of sustainable packaging because human health is central to sustainability. And the Understanding Packaging Scorecard, which I think we've put up a link to on the LinkedIn page, is a new tool which is aiming to do that, quantifying the environmental and the health impacts of food packaging. And so the health impacts of packaging is an area where significant improvements are possible. We can actually control it, and the improvements are necessary. And so hopefully today's episode sheds some light on this and gives people some future thought on the role and the future of packaging for brands and retailers. So I hope you agree with my takeaway. I'd like to thank the panelists for being with us today. Thank you very much for giving this such insightful ideas and contributions. Also, thank you to the audience for being with us. And I'd like to just reinforce to the audience and people listening to this that we want to hear from you too about what are the issues that you'd like us to address in this episode, because we really want to address issues that are of interest to the value chain. So let us know your comments, your ideas on the event page. Please follow the Glass Hallmark website to keep up to date on the next episodes. And so without further ado, let me thank you for your time and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.